This is an SOS video to help you with your quarter test review. So Unit 5 was on inequalities. I'm asking you to write a compound inequality statement for each of these graphs, represent the solution set in interval notation. So when we talk about compound inequality, you know there has to be more than one inequality sign. So these are all the numbers between -4 and -1, so I can write it as x is greater than -4 and at the same time less than or equal to -1. You could also write it as x is greater than -4 and x is less than or equal to -1. Either one of those is correct. Interval notation, what my lowest number is, which is -4, I can't include it open circle, so it's parentheses. What my highest number is, -1, it's a solid circle, so that's a bracket. For this one, my compound inequality statement is x compared to -2. These are all the numbers that are less than or equal to -2. Since there's a space here, I know this is an or. And then x compared to 0, these are all the numbers that are greater than 0. So I'm going to write it as interval notation. I start from left to right, and I stop anywhere I see an arrow, a dot, or a space. So interval notation, this is pointing to -infinity. That's parentheses. It comes to -2, bracket. This empty space is a v or. Then we start up with the circle here at 0. It's open circle, so I have a parentheses, comma, and these are all the numbers pointing to positive infinity, parentheses. Right, then you're asked to solve for the inequality and graph it on a number line. So to solve for this, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. I get 5x, that's a 0 pair, is less than 14. I divide by 5. And I get x is less than 2.8. So if I'm going to graph it on a number line, 2.8 is between 2 and 3. Put a few more numbers here. And 2.8 is closer to 3. So that would be 2.8. Open circle, because it does not have an equal sign, and these are all the numbers that are less than 2.8. Now we have a word problem inequality. Andre has $12. He buys a candy bar for 75 cents, a magazine for $3, and some snack bags for $1.25. What's the most snack bags Andre could buy? Well, think about it. He bought the candy bar for 75 cents. He also bought one magazine, and he bought some snack bags. We don't know how many, so X is going to equal the number of snack bags. How much did he pay for that? Well, they were each $1.25 times how many snack bags he had. Remember, Andre only has $12 to spend, so all this has to be less than or equal to 12. First thing I'm going to do is combine like terms. The next thing I'm going to do is subtract 375 from both sides. I got 1.25x is less than or equal to, that's 825. And to solve for x, I'm going to divide by 1.25 on both sides. Instead of multiplying by 1.25, I divide by that. Okay, I'm going to grab my calculator, and I put in 8.25 divided by 1.25, and I get 6.6. So if x is less than or equal to 6.6, that means the most snack bags he could have purchased would have been 6 snack bags. All right, let's go to Unit 6, which is graphing linear equations. You're asked to write the equation of a line that passes through these points. So this first point, the x and y, I can call it x1, y1. This second point, the x and y, I can call it x sub 2, y sub 2. To write the equation of a line, we first need our slope, then we need our y-intercept, and finally we can write our equation. So our slope is found by change in y over change in x, delta y over delta x. I'm going to take one y value, 5, and I'll subtract the other y value, negative 35. I come back to this point, I had negative 9, and I'm going to subtract the other x value, 1. So minus a negative is the same as adding a positive. This is 40 over negative 10, which is negative 4. To find the y-intercept, I pick any one of these points. So say I pick negative 9, 5. Remember, this is my x, this is my y. And I'm going to substitute in y equals mx plus b. My y value is 5. My slope I just found was negative 4. My x is negative 9 plus b. So this gives me 5 equals 36 plus b. I subtract I subtract 36 from both sides. I get negative 31 as b. So my y-intercept is negative 31. My slope is negative 4. And my equation is y equals negative 4x minus 31. If I take my calculator, I go to y equals, and I put in my equation, negative 4x minus 31. When I go to my table of values, I should expect to see these 2 points. So I look at table, second graph. I look for when x is negative 9. I might have to go up a little bit. Negative 9, the y value is 5, which is what I have here. Let's find out when x is 1. Go all the way down to 1 here, and the y value is negative 35. So I know my equation is correct. Well, what about the equation of a line parallel to the x-axis that goes through this point? If I draw a quick sketch of the x and y axes, and I draw a line that's parallel to the x-axis, I realize it goes through the y-axis. So this equation is going to be y equals a number, and if it goes through this point, it has to go through that y value, so it's y equals 15. Let's take a look at the next few questions. Unit 7 was the applications of linear equations. So in this case, we have the relationship between the air in a diver's scuba tank and the time he is underwater as shown in the graph below. This line did not show up too well, so I'm going to draw this again so we'll have a better idea. It stops here, here, and over here. So you're asked to state the x and y intercepts and explain the meaning of each in the context of the situation. So y-intercept is where this graph is touching the y-axis, so the y-intercept is 40. And what does that mean? This is always the beginning of my situation. So I write initially, Drew had 40 cubic feet, so 40 cubic feet of air in his tank. That's the situation at the very beginning. Then you're asked to find the x-intercept. So that's where this graph touches the x-axis. If I don't see numbers here, I know I'm counting by ones. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This stopped at 6. My x-intercept is 6. And what does that mean? That means in 6 minutes, Drew had no more air in his tank, which means we say the tank is empty of air. Please don't ever say 0 for that. You have to be able to explain what the 0 meant. Now you're asked to calculate the rate of change and explain its meaning in the context of the situation. So if our y-intercept was 40, that meant one of the points was 0, 40. If our x-intercept was 6, another point is 6, 0. To find the rate of change, it's change in y over change in x. I write my xy over those values. So I have 40 minus 0 over 0 minus 6. That gives me 40 over negative 6. And 6 goes into this, 6.6 repeating, negative 6.6 repeating, or we say negative 6 and 2/3. And what does that mean in context of the situation? It means that if I put this over 1, this is talking about my air in the tank, and this is talking about minutes. So the tank empties of air at the rate of 6 2/3 cubic feet of air every minute. We could say per minute or each minute, but that is your rate of change. All right, and our final series of questions involves your next two units. So unit 7E was a scatter plot. I'm going to draw a quick graph that has a correlation coefficient of negative 0.56. Negative means that as the x increases, the y decreases. 0.56 means it really doesn't have a strong relationship. So the dots are shown that they're going down, but they're pretty much scattered all over the place. How about this one, negative 0.82? Again, negative correlation. As x increases, the y decreases, but these will be much closer together. So if I drew a straight line, most of the points would be either on the line or very close to it. And our last unit was on systems of linear equations. So if you're asked to solve a system of equations graphically, that means we need to graph each of these lines. We look for the point of intersection, and that is our solution. It's a point that makes both of these equations true. So for this first one, I have to get y by itself. I divide by 2, all the terms by 2. I have y equals 4x minus 3. That means my slope is 4. If I'm going to graph, I need two numbers for my two movements, so I put this over 1. And my y-intercept is the constant negative 3. So for my slope, this is change in y. A positive 4 means I'm going up. This is change in x, and a positive number means I'm going to the right. So let's go to the graph and graph that. We first label our axes y and x. I'm going to go to negative 3 on my y-axis and put a dot. Then this is how I move. I go up 4 boxes and 1 to the right, put a dot. Up 4 boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 to the right, put a dot. Up 4 boxes and 1 to the right, put a dot. I take my straight edge. I'm going to extend my line all the way through, so it goes all the way through this coordinate plane, and I write my original equation somewhere near the graph. I could write it at the bottom by the arrow, or I could write it on the side. This one, we still don't have y isolated, so I'm going to subtract x from both sides. I have negative y equals negative x minus 3. I'm going to divide everything by a negative 1. And I get y equals x plus 3. So my slope is the coefficient of x, which is 1. I'm going to make it a fraction, put it over 1. And my y-intercept is 3. A positive 1 for the change in y means I'm going to go up 1. And a positive 1 on the bottom, change in x, means I go to the right. So let's take a look at this. I go up 3 for my y-intercept, put a dot, then up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. I take my straight edge, and I'm going to connect the dots and draw a line all the way through. That's called extending my line. And I write my equation somewhere on that line. I'm not done yet, because remember, when you're asked to solve the following system of equations graphically, we need to write what the common solution is. So the common solution is where those two lines meet, and that ordered pair is positive 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, positive 5. So 2, 5 is our common solution. And finally, you're asked to solve the following system algebraically. I can either try to do this substitution or elimination method. I'm going to do substitution. So I'm going to add x to both sides, and I get y equals x plus 3. What that means is anywhere I see y, I am going to replace it with x plus 3. So I take a look at my next equation, I see y, and I'm going to replace it with x plus 3. 5x plus 2 times x plus 3 equals negative 1. And we'll distribute and solve for x, because that's the only variable left. Combine like terms, 7x plus 6 is negative 1. Subtract 6 from both sides, 7x is negative 7. Divide by 7, x equals negative 1. I haven't solved the system yet because I need 2 answers for the 2 variables. So I take this, I go back to either original equation. This one looks a little simpler, so I'm going to write that. In place of x, I put negative 1. So y minus the value of x, negative 1. Subtract a negative is the same as adding a positive. Y plus 1 is 3. And let's get y by itself. Subtract 1. Y equals 2. So I know my common solution is negative 1, 2. And I can check it by substituting it back in both equations. And that's your SOS video to help you with your extended response and part of your Castle Learning assessment for the Quarter 2 test.